Just as a reminder, this webinar is what Indigenous learners need from you as a school, university, career counselor who are bringing in Indigenous learners. And we have an amazing panel of an urban, Inuit, First Nation, and Métis perspective. Yeah, give me a round of applause. I don't normally say this publicly, but we have the full flavor spectrum of Neapolitan ice cream here today. Too often, and John, nothing is huge, too often we're just getting one perspective on Indigenous learners. You're just hearing from one vantage point. And so when I proposed this idea to Sarek, they were open to it. They're like, yeah, we want to hear from every distinctive group because urban learners have something different than Métis, have something different from Inuit, and have something different than First Nations. So that's what today's about. If you were in the wrong session, now is your chance to go if you would like to go. I'm just saying, if you were squished somewhere, I'm sorry, you're stuck here at least until 4:45. If you were like dying of thirst, I have some extra water bottles that they gave me, so just like raise your hand and I'll toss you water. Dana, you're gonna help me out, right? Dana's here in the house. Dana's here from Ripen, and he's gonna help distribute water for those that are thirsting for liquid, because you're sweating so much here. You're getting the nice back sweats, and you're like, why did I come to this session? I'm so sweaty at the end of day, and I'm like, but hopefully you'll get something great out of it. So to start us off, Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, the term ISET, it's not to be confused with I said, but ISET. What does it stand for? Because we hear that term. Some of us actually have been like, what is ISET? Is that like, what does it stand for? Because we all love acronyms in this world. But what is an ISET holder? What does it mean? And maybe you want to close us off. Give us a highlight from the day yesterday and tell us what happened.
Perfect. Well, ISEP stands for Indigenous. Can everybody hear me? No? Okay. It stands for Indigenous Skills and Employment Training Program. It's intended to enhance the skills and employment of Canada's Indigenous people. And it originates from a previous strategy, which was called ASET, so another acronym, and at that time it was called the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Program. So overall, the goal is to provide and create training, education, and employment opportunities for Indigenous individuals as well as communities, with the goal of enhancing economic self-sufficiency for Indigenous people. So there's over 90 ISEP holders across Canada, and here's a few of us. We all hold different values, but there's some things that are the same. So we report to the federal government. We all sign contribution agreements. We do mid-dialogues. We do year-end dialogues. So we're very accountable for the funds that we receive. Some differences that came to ISEPs as opposed from the previous predecessor ASETs was ISEPs has given us a lot of ability to co-develop partnerships with other Indigenous partners and to make sure that we're really meeting the needs of the community and Indigenous peoples in our community. It also gave us increased funding, which was really good. ISEPs gave us greater flexibility, so we've been able to create unique training partnerships and initiatives for Indigenous people outside of the box, which was really needed. And then as well, it's distinction-based strategy. So we have First Nations, we have Inuit, and we have Métis ISEPs holders all across the country. And as far as what I heard yesterday was that we really are all the same because we share similar challenges. We all have a lack of funding. Even though the funding was increased, it still isn't enough to help all of our community members. We know that clients have barriers to accessing the funding because criteria is put in place. We also know that many of our ISEPs holders cover a large area. So we cover the province of Alberta. So it's really hard to bring unique training to a whole province when certain communities have different needs. So those are challenges. But one thing I did hear yesterday, and that we are all the same in, is that we care and that we are working really hard to bring unique training initiatives to the communities that we serve.
And what happened yesterday, though? Just to give context of.
Oh, we all met yesterday as ICEPS holders to share best practices and some of our challenges. We did the peach and the pit and a banana.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And then how much would Rupert's Land have for the year to spend?
Our agreement gives us roughly about $17 million a year to cover, like I said, the province of Alberta.
Yeah, and that's tuition, housing for students to go into education.
Yeah, it provides income support and covers tuition, yeah.
Amazing, thank you. John, you're next. Maybe a highlight from the day yesterday, and just to give context, what's kind of roughly your ISET amount that you kind of manage each year for your region?
Sure. And to begin with, just want to acknowledge the territory on which we speak, and also recognize the elder that started the day off yesterday, Minwa Mazwin, starting things off in a good way. So, as was said from Darian, there's a representation from First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and urban region, and that's what the ISETAs, the Indigenous Skills Training Agreement holders, are doing within Canada. And yes, there's close to the 120 ISETAs across the country, 22 of which are in Ontario. And there are two main things that these ISETAs are doing across the country. They're helping with build skills and employment outcomes. Those are the two main areas that we're measured on. And as was said, we report on a regular basis to the federal government. And some of the ISETA holders will leverage the federal dollars to get other dollars to do initiatives. So as was discussed yesterday, we talked about some of those wise practices that are going on. We don't necessarily call them best practice, because what we do in Northern Ontario may not be the best solution for other parts of the country. But one of the things that I think is in common, as Lisa referenced, was some similarities. It's more like a holistic service where we're offering those wraparound type of supports that make sure that clients' needs are focused on. So it could be transportation support, it could be child support, there are training allowances, and more now we're looking at partnering with organizations to help with mental health and other types of disabilities. And one of the things we did talk about, and I think, who was it earlier today, Sunny Wong talked about this. One of the things that I think Indigenous learners need is to be acknowledged. So acknowledge that they're a brave individual to get to the place where they are. You may not realize the circumstances that they've had, and there's a very good chance that that stress, that anxiety is lingering on when they are meeting you. So to acknowledge that, but also recognize that culture context matters. Realize that that culture, and it may be different, First Nation, Métis, Inuit, it may be different culture, but it does matter. And those are the types of things that ISETA holders do on a regular basis. And we try to have the right tools. We have case management tools with interventions that we report on an annual basis. And getting back to your question, we work with AETS. We have 9 First Nation communities. We're about 25 strong, I think. I don't see actually anyone from the staff here, but we have about 25 staff here in the service, and probably about 2-3 million plus our other dollars that we leverage from the provincial government to do different training programs in apprenticeships. It could be in different areas such as health sector, forestry, mining, construction. Anyways,
That's awesome.
Pause there.
That's great. Dorothy, thank you for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk about maybe a highlight from yesterday that stood out to you?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dorothy Pye Johnson, and I'm the Director of...
This is you here.
Oh, this is me here?
This is you guys.
Okay. Employment and Skills Development with the New Natural Public Community Council. We're an Inuit ISET holder from South and Central Labrador. We operate as an Inuit collective outside of ITK. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there, and I do see some other Inuit ISET holders in the room, so it's great to see you guys here. We serve a population of about 6,000 people with my organization, and our ISETS agreement is roughly around $1.6 million per year. We also are involved in an SPF and a training consortium called the Labrador Aboriginal Training Partnership, which with the Nations government and the Innu Nation, and we have a pot of funding. We've had several pots of funding now, but the most recent pot of funding was around developing training options for Indigenous people in Labrador around Voisey's Bay underground development, which is Voisey, for those of you that don't know, Voisey's Bay is a nickel mine located in northern Labrador, and both the Nunatio government and the Innu Nation have impact and benefit agreements attached to that particular mining development. So so we're that's a little bit about who I am. There's a bunch of my staff here today. Can you guys stand up? My staff, so I can just introduce my team. I don't do this work alone. And this is my team here, and Denise down here. And we have people from the Labrador Aboriginal Training Partnership. I think we have a few people from their staff. Do you guys want to stand up if you're here in the room, or let yourself be known here? Yeah, down here. So, so I guess from yesterday, you asked for a highlight from yesterday.
Highlight.
I think one of the big things that struck me yesterday was talking about, we talked about a lot of things about, about the work that we do and jobs and, finding jobs for people, meaningful jobs, how to engage people. But one of the things that I really stood out for me is that I think a lot of our communities are still on very much on a healing path. And I think that that's super important, I think, to recognize, and that sometimes when we have people that come to us looking for help, that they're not always out of a place where they can engage directly in talking about getting a job. Sometimes they need to start somewhere that's before that. And so that's I think a really important thing to remember sometimes. So that was one of the things that stood out for me.
Awesome. All right, Tammy, tell us about yourself, and you pull that mic over too a little closer if you want. Yeah.
Pensé. My name is Tammy Omiso. On my mother's side, I'm Cree from the Erminesque Nation, which is a Treaty 6 in Alberta. On my father's side, I'm Chinese. I'm married into the Kwakwaka'wakw people, which are northern Vancouver Island. My traditional names are Paisum Esqua, which means sun women. My adopted name is Maladi. And, it's hard to translate, and I don't know if it means beach whales. So it could be in-laws or it could be something else. I'm not sure, but I'm just going to take it as it is. I'm a mother of 5 boys. So I work for Access, which is an urban ISET holder in Vancouver, BC, where there's about 60 to 70,000 urban people that reside in Vancouver. So Access, I live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territories of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish Nations. So I'm very fortunate to be able to work for Access, and I'm the director of employment services, but I also oversee the youth programming, which is K-12. We have started to invest a lot of money into K-12 programming. We got to start younger. We got to start empowering our youth. They are our future, but they are right now as well, right? And we are kind of like the one-stop Indigenous employment training organization in Vancouver. And I want to share a little bit of, well, it will be stats, but it's also, a lot of people don't understand what is urban, right? I'm First Nations, but I am urban too. So a lot of people will they don't think they could come to an urban ISET holder because they're saying, well, I'm First Nations. We are actually land-based too. As long as you're living within Vancouver area, you could come to see if you could utilize our services. And I love the fact that I'm going to transition right now. Our WISE practices yesterday, I said connections, collaborations, partnerships, those are so important. And also seeing the other ICE that's talking about the urban. I'm going to point this out when we were talking about our different categories. A couple times we missed urban. And as urban, from the Friendship Center movements, from other ICE holders that service urban, we're kind of the last on the board. But we make up a big population. A lot of our people are moving to the urban centers, right? For example would be, I quickly pulled out my stats. So we served to date about 1,600 urban Indigenous people. 84 were from Alberta, 1,085 BC, 14 Northwest Territories, 10 from the Yukon, 132 from Saskatchewan, 103 from Manitoba, 23 from Ontario, 1 from Nova Scotia. And then we also we did 111 Métis and self-identified. What does that look like? We don't want to be the government. We don't want to, put those racist policies out there. I don't want to be a government employee. I want to say, you know what? Tell us your story. We know, the 60 scoops and all these different things. So why would us as an ICET holder, an urban ICET holder, want to put more barriers in front of our people? What else? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. It's amazing. Thank you. Let me give a round of applause to this amazing panel. That's cool. So, Dorothy, did you see the Atlantic Ocean before you came over here? Did you see the Atlantic Ocean?
No, because I live in Goose Bay.
So it's too far?
Goose Bay is on an inlet, and it's 90 miles inland.
You got some Atlanticness in there, a little bit.
Some. But I grew up right on the Atlantic Ocean.
It's like our Crab Beach. It's kind of Pacific-y.
The community where I grew up boasts the point. It's the most furthest point, easterly point on mainland North America.
That's cool.
It's on a little community called Cape Charles, and it's right on the east coast of Labrador. It's Labrador's like a triangle.
Yeah.
Well, we're right on that triangle on the south coast before you start turning west.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So close to the Atlantic, on the Pacific. We got Alberta, we got Ontario. This is a good mix. Okay, this is why you came here, this next question. It's why, who's taking notes today? Show me the note takers in the room. There's some note takers. Look at this guy is standing up. He's so stoked. He's like, I got a book. I got a whole new notebook just for this. I got a fresh pen. I'm gonna lick I don't know why people do. They lick the tips of their pens when they're really eager. You might be yeah, it's getting hot. Dana, how we doing, warmth-wise? You good? You need it? We got some water here in case. Okay. So this is the important question. We'll start with you, Lisa. This is the nuggets. This is the meat and potatoes. And by the way, this is being recorded if you're like somehow you passed out because of the heat and you missed this part, or your notes were super messy. This is being recorded and you could watch it and share it with people, because also you might be like, you know what, my friend went to the other workshop, the non-sweaty sauna one, and I went to the sauna. This is like the hot yoga one. You could share it with them and hear from the original voices. So, Lisa, what do you wish institutions, organizations, schools knew and would do for learners that you send off? Because you fund them, you support them, and you kind of like send them off with even a backpack sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're like, you go out there and change the world, and you're like, bye. The people that receive them are in this room right now. What do you want them to know about Métis learners?
Awesome. And just to let you guys know, Darian was the one who hooked us up with the backpacks for our students. They go off in style. Definitely, we'd like to see flexible entrance options, because we get clients come to us and we can't put them through a training program because they can't meet the entrance requirements. So that's high on our list. We also hear a lot of culturally safe spaces. So a lot of students don't complete post-secondary because they don't feel safe in the space that we're at. So we'd really like to see that change.
What does that look like? Give me some examples of safe places.
Well, I was going to talk about it later.
Oh, yeah?
About
okay.
our
Okay. Okay.
But a start is Indigenous spaces in all schools, and now in Alberta, all of our major post-secondaries have Indigenous student spaces, and I think I see that all over Canada as well. So that's a step in the right direction. We also would like to see traditional knowledge and language being shared, and we start to see that more and more. U of A is a leader in that. We're seeing it a little more at the University of Calgary, but we really need to see it at our college level. So we need to see language and culture entwined a little more in college entrance programs. And the other thing that we would like to see is flexible learning options. I just personally struggle with this with my son. We're trying to get him through grade 12, and he likes to do everything on paper, and they're like, but he has to do it on the computer. And I'm like, well, our goal is to get him to grade 12. So if he needs to do it on paper, can't you accept it? So it's been a struggle, so I have to mama bear my way into that one. But I'd like to see that for all Indigenous learners, having some flexible learning options. And then I just want to build upon what Tammy said. I didn't even think about it as one of the things I wanted to discuss, but we need to start younger. We need to start. We went to a session once and we heard if we're not catching them in that grade 4, 5, 6 age range, that you almost, then they don't do well in junior high. And if they don't do well in junior high, they don't do well in high school. So we were kind of thinking we have to like help our high school age students, but it's like, no, you have to start younger. So that's another thing. Cool. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about distinctives later, but in case we get to it, because it's like it's tight here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the Safe Place that you launched recently?
Absolutely. So we've heard for several years that our Métis students just didn't feel comfortable going into Indigenous centers. They didn't see themselves represented. They just didn't even want to walk through the doors. So in the back of our mind, we wanted to create a space for Métis on campus. So we tossed it around with different post-secondaries, and we have great partnerships with all of our post-secondaries. We hold endowments for our Indigenous learners, for our Métis learners at a lot of our post-secondaries. But Norquest College stepped up and said, we hear you and we're going to give you your own space for Métis students. So Norquest College has a high Métis student population, so they believed in this concept. So we launched last November our very first in Canada Métis specific student center. So it's in close proximity to the Indigenous Center, but it is specifically for, no, I'm not going to say specifically for our Métis students. It isn't. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit more about the creation of it. Okay, because we thought if this space is going to be for students, it should be created by Métis students. So we're really proud because it was a student-led initiative. It was like, what do you want to see in it? What do you want it to look like? So we heard from our students. And one thing we heard was because they didn't feel comfortable going into Indigenous student centers, they didn't want anyone to not feel welcome in the Métis Student Center. So it is a center for all students, whether you're Métis, First Nations, Inuit, or non-Indigenous. It is a place to learn about the Métis people. So we're really proud of that. It is also run by a Métis student who has transitioned into a Rupert's Land employee. So we hired him as an intern, gave him some work experience, and when he was done, he was like, are there any jobs here for me? And we're like, we got one for you. It's running our student center.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have to ask this because we have time. I was just at a session just before, and a person with a doctorate, one of the smartest people in the world, asked me privately, said, what is a Métis person? I still don't actually know. And she grew up in Canada, she's probably super educated, but never was taught the difference. So just could you give a brief, like...
I can.
You can find them. You can find them right across Canada, and they're
yeah, no, absolutely. So we at the Métis Nation of Alberta, we adhere to the Métis National Council definition. So I think there's different groups who have different definitions of Métis.
Yeah.
But we fall under the governance of the Métis National Council, and their definition of a Métis citizen is somebody who comes from the historic Métis community in the Red River and is accepted by community. So that's the definition that we fall under.
Nice. And some of them have cards, and some of them have sashes, and some of them
Yeah.
play the fiddle, or they don't. So, awesome.
Yeah,
I think they all take them.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. That's awesome. John, question for you. Similar question. You have the chance, you have the floor, you have the audience. What do you wish they knew? What are some practical examples, stories, things they could be doing for your learners that you send off?
Right. And certainly a lot of things that was said already is resonating with the other ISETA holders. But one of the things, just so the audience understands, when we talk about these ISETA holders across Canada, it was only 5 years ago that it began to be more distinct based. So up until about 5 years ago, we were in an agreement and we were collectively working together in the same room and working with solutions. But it was just recently that the federal government has this distinct based funding. And we're in the middle, we're in the 5 of a 10-year agreement now. And we're reviewing or about to be evaluated on how we move forward. But one of the things I said at the beginning was to acknowledge the learners and their circumstances, recognize that culture counts, but also the whole idea of being inclusive. And we're practicing what we're preaching. We moved into a library and we offer our services in a public domain. But when we moved in, we had the elders, an elders committee that really helped us to understand how to be a more inclusive workplace. So we have in the space the 4 directions on the ceiling. We've got a green sage color on the walls. We've got wood within the organization that represents the culture. And we have an elders in residence. So again, when I talked earlier about holistic services, there may be elders that could help and citizens that would be open to that type of guidance, perhaps that type of spiritual guidance that some citizens that are connected to their traditions would appreciate and help them on their respective journey. And on that topic of journey, realize that the students in question may have come from a background that you're not aware of. You're not familiar with that type of journey. And certainly language, as has been referenced, is some of the things that we're recognizing as an ISET holder. And we're going to be putting this on the store, what is it called, the Google Play Store, for free, but it's a language app. So that as part of our training programs now, we'll be integrating that as part of the program. Even though they're learning carpentry or doing construction, that'll be built into the program. But land-based learning is another experience that perhaps some of the learners that you're getting have received. And we've got a Trillium grant to study actually the graduation rate over a 6-year period of Indigenous students that are off reserve versus on reserve. So on reserve, there are examples, and Beatdagon Nishnabek Pick River is a good example of a private high school that works in their community, close to 80% success rate of those that graduate with a grade 12 that are 18 to 20. Off reserve, the numbers aren't so good. And in fact, you compare the non-Indigenous, probably close to 90%, and it's closer to 30% for those that live off reserve going to get their high school. So certainly before they go off to college, university, it's typical that the individual that's going to the college, going to the university, are having a lot of years of experience towards getting their education. And again, we're trying to look at tools that will help change that. And land-based learning is a good example of how to retain students in programs and getting credits. So we have a teacher on staff, and we have credits that are offered in land-based learning. But also we do the PLAR, just like a prior learning assessment recognition, just like a regular school. And we're finding that alternative has helped, particularly during COVID. And at least in our neck of the woods, there were a lot of students that didn't end up continuing with the regular system. And this is why we're studying on how we could make suggestions, recommendations that will help that learner. And then the whole idea of partnership. Certainly schools, your organizations, there is the ability to partner. And the ISET holders are located across Canada. So it's very likely there is an opportunity for you to partner, to collaborate on initiatives so that you're both bringing things to the table and working with different organizations. I think MIR is represented here today, the Mining Industry Sector Council, and we do training in the mining sector. And there's a curriculum that MIR built with Indigenous input. And we're working with different organizations like that are like-minded and want to make a difference and make sure we have graduates that are making a good transition to employment.
It's amazing. And those that are maybe thinking, man, I've never met an ISET holder or talked to one in my community, and I'm looking around and I recognize some folks. Who's an ISET holder in this room right now that could, and look around the room, look at the friendliest, smiliest people, look at these are the coolest people in the world. They would probably love to talk to you and be like, this is how we could work together, right? You'd love that conversation.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think one of the things that we learned over the years that, and this is a good representation on why we're trying to see if this is part of the regular Cannexus event and not just a pre-event, but perhaps more integrated into the regular. Prior to working with First Nations, this is my 13th year, and I'm looking at my mentor, Polly Bobbywash from the Anishinaabe Nation. And prior to that, I worked for the university and college system and was in your shoes and didn't know what I didn't know. So there's a lot of information, and your ISET holders are, as Darian said, they're friends to help.
It's awesome. Dorothy.
Okay, I've been listening to all this fascinating information.
Mic over here. We don't have a Britney Spears mic.
And you're gonna have to ask me the question again, Darian.
Yes. So, okay, you have a chance to talk to.
Disclosure: I do have ADHD, so I'm.
No, you have a chance to talk to like university college. Not this guy though. Oh no, he's coming up closer. He's like, this is so good. I'm coming closer. Anyone else? There's 2 more chairs here, by the way. If you want a chair, anyone, you guys want a chair? You're comfy? You're good. No, I'm just saying. If you want a chair, they're super comfy. That's great. Thank you. If you could talk to colleges, universities who receive your students, because a lot of times you send them off, right?
Yes.
And you say goodbye. You send them with a Tupperware of delicious food, and you're like, all the best, and come back one day, right? But what do you think? Those that receive those students, those that house them, those that bring them into their institutional systems, what do you wish they knew about specific? And you mentioned a couple yesterday to me.
Yeah.
I think like even food.
Yeah.
What kind of food should they? You mentioned.
So, yeah, well, you guys talked about culturally safe spaces, of course, super important. I think it's, I think for Inuit learners it's important for them to connect. If there's a group of Inuit people, learners in an institution, it's important for the institution to find ways so they can connect. Inuit society is very much about collective over the individual. And also very important for, I think, to find ways that people can contribute to their collective wherever they are, and ways they can maybe even contribute to the greater Indigenous community to where they are. So to have tasks to contribute to the community is an important thing for I think an Inuit learner outside of the regular schoolwork. I think that it's really important that they see themselves reflected in the curriculum, and that there can be examples of how the curriculum would apply to their communities, that type of thing.
Someone might be asking, should I put igloos on things? Would that help?
Well,
maybe
it could, but
they should ask me. Maybe ask the students.
But even in the spaces, like to have specific things like tools, things for ceremony that we use like nowadays, and like it is essentially a tool, but we use like the hoodlik now a lot for ceremony. Those types of things are super important to have. If you want to be specific, for food, for sure, like for somebody who's living in, like schools don't have to come up with all these things themselves always either. Like a lot of bigger centers have friendship centers. They have Inuit specific, urban organizations that can. So for you to be able to reach out and have that really strong partnership with those organizations is super important because they can help you to facilitate getting food to your students, help your students connect with, the broader community, those types of things. So that's really important. You're not gonna, a lot of food you're gonna have to bring in from the north, like, if you wanna have caribou or mutt duck or, any of those types of things, you're gonna have to bring them in for sure. You're not gonna be able to get them necessarily in Ottawa. And access to elders is really important. I think that I think this is a common thing, certainly across all Indigenous cultures, that having access to elders is really important if you're outside your community and inside your community too, of course. Land-based activities, if you can, wherever you can build land-based activities as part of the extracurricular or part of the curriculum, it's really good. Keeping in mind, I think that, if somebody is outside of the Inuit regions, that the experience is going to be very different for them. I know for myself, and I'm speaking for myself, my experience as an Indigenous person, and my connection to place is very specific. And so I live in Goose Bay. It's part of my territory, but it's not where I grew up. So if I go off on the land in Goose Bay, if I go off on skidoo or boat or whatever, I don't know where to go. I don't know the ice, I don't know the channels, I don't know the land, I don't feel safe, I don't know where to hunt, any of those things. So if I'm doing that, I want to be able to connect with somebody who lives in that area, to be able to do so I can feel all of those things. Now, if I go home to my community, I got no problem navigating all those things on my own. So I think that if you're having land-based activities in a community that's outside your own community, that for people to feel safe and to feel it's an authentic experience, that it's important that it be somebody that's from that community and from that culture. So I just wanted to point that out.
And it can help them navigate and kind of big buddy them through the world. Yeah.
Yes, and facilitate that.
Yeah.
And I also think it's important that, we talk about bringing students to schools. Sometimes it's important that we're where we can to be able to actually bring training programs out to community as well, and because it's not always easy for people to always pick up. And so contract-based training, there's something to be said for that as well, and being able to deliver when it makes sense. Training right at the community level. So having for Indigenous communities to be able to have access to that and have spaces to be able to facilitate that too in their communities, like training centers and things. It's super important. So that's I guess a federal government kind of infrastructure support kind of issue. And also, we've had some success in Labrador with co-delivering training programs, particularly trades programs, with Indigenous co-instructors from the community who can provide the translation and those types of things. So that's really, really super helpful as well when we can facilitate that. And I think that job opportunities, where there's opportunities, if you have somebody from the north coming to study where you can facilitate co-op options, work experience options, those things back in their community, that's really great. Who doesn't want to go home, right? Yeah. And to ensure that the curriculum that you're developing is going to be relevant for them to be able to translate that knowledge and be able to bring it back and use it in their community, because many people want to go home and work in their community. So that's really important. I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, we're gonna have time for questions. I just want to get Tammy a chance to share, and then we're gonna do a quick rapid fire, one story each of an example, and then we're gonna have room for Q&A. We're gonna have like almost 15 minutes, which is great. And then Lisa sadly has to go catch a plane, so but you might be able to like message her through the internets somehow. Tammy, what do you wish people knew about urban, Indigenous people entering the university, college, trades, learning schools?
I guess going to go back to connections, collaborations, partnerships by Indigenous for Indigenous. That's the bottom line. We gotta work together in regards to, making meaningful post-secondary opportunities. Prime example would be, we do individual seats, so clients will come to us and they want to go into their training programs, and way to go, and that's fine. We do have our job coaches, we have our advisors and stuff like that. But the model that really works with our people are the cohorts. Because they have that support system, the family, they go through, and they know they're with a group that understands each other's, where everyone has come from. And if more and more post-secondaries could kind of work with our ISETs to build these cohorts, to help listen to, we have the experience, we know our people, we know the needs, the wants, and all those things. Hear our voices, and then we work together to make those successes. We're successful, you're successful, vice versa, right? Prime example, one of our very successful cohorts is our electrical program. So what we did is, as some of you know, electrical program, you need your physics 12 or physics 11. Ideally, you have 12. You have your pre-calc or your calc 12. Many of our Indigenous students, they don't get those in high school. And so we decided to create a pathway. What that pathway, we weren't looking for your grade 12. If you have it, great. If the prerequisites, you don't have it, let's work with you. What does that look like? I mean, there's still the assessments, and there's still all these little hurdles that they would have to go through, right? However, we eliminated the bigger ones. If you have the passion, the drive, the initiative, we will work with you. We're going to meet our clients where they're at. And we want those successes, so let's wrap around services to get them through. So we decided to do this pathway to electrical. We took those barriers down. They had their interviews. They had their assessments. Could we work with, what they have been able to provide? They got through. We worked with the essential skills, our IS4S now, to bring them up because they had the passion, they had the drive. What happens is a lot of our students don't get those prerequisites because what's happening is, maybe they didn't eat for the day. Maybe they're taking care of their parents. Maybe they're taking care of their younger siblings. The last thing they could focus on is academics. But that doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to learn or to achieve these things. It's just life has happened. And so let's give them those opportunities. So we do the essential skills, we do 8 weeks, let's get them up to this level, work with the unions, electrical joint training committee. They provided all the electrical trades, but they also have the jobs at the end. And having that cohort, having that wraparound services and be able to support them through that with employment at the end in an industry that's willing to work with us and provide that meaningful partnership and support beyond just, here, you got a job, it's really helped us. I mean, we did it was a pathway. We kind of did a boo-boo. They all graduated the first level. Get to the second level. Be honest, it went boom. We bombed it. But we didn't say, oh, we're going to give up. No, okay, well, we got to go back to the drawing board and we're going to look at it and, okay, what happened? Math is very foundational. We got them through the first year, but some of those foundational skills weren't there because we kind of crammed it all in. So we said, okay, that's okay. We'll go back to the drawing board. We got them tutoring. We found out where their needs were, how to get them there. But the biggest thing, we kept them as a cohort. And we brought them all back to the training. We did the level 2, passed it, no problem. Level 3, cohort. Level 4, boom. So we have this cohort that got all the way through where they wouldn't even have that opportunity if someone didn't, adapt, work with, and saw that passion and that drive. So the success of that is we just graduated 13 electrical students, and there was, out of the 13, 7 of them were females. And like, that's phenomenal. Now we have this it's about that passion and just seeing beyond that. So if I kind of, you know, when I was talking to the ISETS team, we go beyond that. Yeah, they're red seals, but why aren't we supporting beyond that? Yeah, they're making good money, and you know, this is what we want, but we need people at that executive level. If they're up at that executive level, then they could help transform the industry to help support and get those apprentices coming on and feeling safe. Safety is priority. Our people need to be safe in these industries that maybe haven't gotten to that place, right? And looking at that, my passion is really working with youth. And so, well, it's with everyone, but youth have a kind of a special heart in me. So when we talk about graduation along here, it's not just graduation, it's meaningful graduation. It's about not a ticky box, hey, you know, our stats have gone up and we graduated a whole bunch of Indigenous youth, but in reality, in the background, they're saying, hey, just take your communications 12. Oh yeah, you can't do that math. No, we'll give you that workplace math. Well, do you think a student, maybe going at, like in my area, it's Point Grey or something, a more elite type of high school compared to Britannia, do you think they got there because they're smarter than our people? No, it's because they have their wraparound supports, the awareness, the exposures, and us as ISETs, we're going to give that to them. Forget that saying you can't do this. We will support you through high school. We'll get you those support systems, whether it's, well, the big piece is STEAM, STEM. We just did a workshop on the future of work. So if you look at the future of work, and we don't know 65% of the jobs, we just don't know what they are yet. But what we do know, AI, IT, all this industry that our people aren't going into. There's no mentors, there's no role models, there's no, so we need to change that. And what was the key message up in that meeting? Change before it happens. So we know this key piece, so let's start working with our students, start younger, do the STEM, do the STEAM, give them those exposures, and also provide, because if you go do a STEM program, they're expensive. So we ensure that we put the money aside because we need our students for the future to go in those roles to be able to be successful. Because we don't know what the future holds, but if we could prepare them in a safe environment and give them those opportunities, I mean, we're halfway there.
That's awesome. Tammy, we're going to get a couple examples. Sorry to cut you off. We want to make room for questions. Does anyone have a quick example of a school doing an awesome job that you want to inspire people with? Maybe not yet. Maybe you'd like to see schools doing an awesome job. Do you have any examples? Do you guys prepare any for? I'm going to guess that's a no. Do you have one, John? No?
Yeah, I think the one example that I can think of is we work with post-secondary institutions to deliver training programs, and the college would be doing recruiting the staff for maybe it's an apprenticeship program, but they've worked with us to make sure that culture is part of that. And if there's somebody that needs to speak to an elder, or if the student needs a laptop or we have a cell phone loaner program. We've got a laptop loaner program. So there are some supports that probably other ISETs do as well that ensure that learner's needs are met, and the college will work with us on that.
Cool. So we got good examples. Every college?
We only have a few in the area.
Okay, but they've all been good.
They've all been good.
Cool. Any other examples, Lisa, you want to share before question time?
Sure, I'll share a quick one. We have a few examples. We have great partnerships with our post-secondaries in Alberta, but one is Portage College out of Lac La Biche, and we set up an endowment with them, and we dispersed our first Métis Scholar Award. I think it was years ago, like 2011 or something. But regardless, Portage was just happy to have this endowment, happy to be able to supplement Métis learners. And there was about 10 students that were going to receive the award, and they were like, let's get them all together and like give them their checks like together. And the only space available was like the auditorium at Portage. So they invited the students, they invited us to come so that we can deliver the checks to them. And the students were like, can I bring my family? And they were like, well, we're in the auditorium, I guess, like I got the room. Well, all of them brought their family because they all wanted to see their, whether it be their son, their daughter, we had aunties and uncles show up. But anyway, this auditorium was filled with people just watching people get a check, and it was not a big check. It was $1,000. But so then Portage was like, wow, this is awesome. So since then, every year they have a specific Métis Scholar Awards ceremony where they allow students to bring their families, and I think every year it gets bigger. Last year we had like music and there was food, and Portage does that on their own dime, and it's separate. And so we do start seeing more and more of our post-secondary partners knowing that, if they treat their Indigenous learners well, then the Indigenous learners will come to their post-secondary. So we're starting to see it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And those that maybe are trying to understand, like, why did we do a session like this? And maybe some of you are like, hey, I've already learned this, but I grow these plants called dahlias. They're these flowers, and only old people grow them, really. So I'm part of this, like, tuber trading club where you trade the tubers and you get more dahlias. It's amazing. And there's a guy in the group named Brian who came over from China. And I asked him one time, I was like, hey, man, tell me about the experience of what people called you in your lifetime. Because I'm Métis, and I'm experiencing, like, we used to be called, like, Indians, and then it was Aboriginal, and now Indigenous, and now people are realizing we're Métis. And he's like, oh, yeah, I know what you're saying. When I came here, like, we were Orientals. It's what I got called. This is, like, old school Vancouver, right? And he goes, then they realized that we were Asian. And then people realized I was actually Chinese. And then people realized there's a difference between Chinese food and Japanese food and Taiwanese food. And I think we get that now as a culture. Like, you don't go to Japan and expect to, you aren't sitting there, or you don't go to Japan with an advertisement with Thai people in it. You're not going to go to Vietnam and promote it with Chinese people in the ads. In the same way, I think we're almost there, and I think post-secondaries are almost there, realizing when you're trying to talk to Indigenous people, we're not all the same, right? And there's actually a difference between Thai food and Chinese food and, Vietnamese food, and there's actually a difference between people who come from urban settings and, who come from Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. So I really appreciate all of you bringing your all here today and actually helping all of us walk away and be like, there's a difference. This is amazing. And share the word, please. Thank you, Candy, for that. Yeah. I think we'll do it again. Should we do it again next year? Yeah?
Yeah.
Bigger room.
Bigger room. Yeah, one bigger room.
And maybe, so Derek is one of our great post-secondary partners, where I said we have great post-secondary partners in Alberta. So Derek's from NAIT, and that is one of our...
We love Nate. That's awesome.
But maybe next year, if we could have our post-secondary partners coming to the table to hear best practices and the challenges. One of our other great post-secondary partners in Alberta, Northern Lakes College, created a virtual Indigenous Student Center. You should check it out. So there, you can schedule virtual appointments with a Métis elder, a Métis or First Nations elder. And then they've got resources on the website, because Northern Lakes College has many campuses, so they couldn't, they were debating, like, where do we put an Indigenous Student Center? And they're like, we can't put one in every single one. We don't have the dollars. So what do we do? So they created this virtual one. So it's an interesting concept. So take a look on their website, and you can access their resources. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh.
Sweet.
So we have a phenomenal trades program. We're one of the provinces that we have about 700 apprentices going through weaving through the different levels, as well as we can be the word I learned yesterday was the indebtor. So we could actually sign their apprentice cards. So they don't have to go to employer, and employer may sign it, maybe they don't want to sign it. We could actually sign as soon as we get them through the training. Wow. And we track all their hours and everything else, and we present it to the provincial board to get their red seals and stuff like that. And the dual credits, yes, we do that. Like, are you talking from the high school perspective, or? Yes, yeah. Right now I have a lady that is actually going to Blanche McDonald doing a makeup and everything. If she does this program, she will graduate. Yes. So they make those concessions. So we ensure if anyone's younger that we're going to work with the post-secondary to get them graduated.
I'm just gonna do a quick pause because Lisa does need to go and catch a plane because she, has places to go, people to see, going back to Edmonton. But why don't we give a round of applause again for the panel? Yeah, thank you, Roxanne, making sure she gets there. Good to see you, by the way. Appreciate everything. This is like the official end, but we have a question right here. If you want to stick around and listen to this question and answer, you're welcome to. But if you leave now, don't feel like it's going to be awkward or weird, because this is actually the official end. But stick around if you want as well, because we have 3 amazing panelists still here.
So Bitigan Nishnabek, Pick River, they are in the midst of publishing their curriculum, and they'll be made available. So if you Google Pick River, Lisa Machano is a contact there. But wild rice harvesting, moose hide tanning, we've done that for land-based credits.
I just wanted to say too that at Nunatuhapu, we are implementing now an Inuit learning program at the grade school level. And we have a bunch of different pillars around food preparation, around hunting, around crafting, boat building, a number of different things. So we're starting to implement that, and we just signed an MOU with the provincial government that's going to allow us to actually build credit courses around traditional skills. So we're very excited about that. This is fairly new, and the challenge is always finding money to fund programming. So. But we're super excited about the possibilities, for sure. So you can certainly look at, and we're always doing land-based things with youth. We try to do at least 1 or 2 a year, like big outings in our communities where elders go out on the land with youth to, pass traditional knowledge about land-based activities. And a big focus now to. Around diabetes prevention too, and land-based activities, and the whole piece around land-based activities and food sovereignty and the passing on of traditional knowledge around that for diabetes prevention in youth. So we're doing a lot of work around that as well.
How we're, as an urban ISET, how we're kind of doing it, because we're very diverse. One way where we could kind of get the money flowing, government employees, is through the Duke of Ed program. So if anyone, it's a very colonial system, but the foundation is pretty good. You got your skills, you got your service, you got your adventure journey, right? So that's how we could get the land-based teaching and use the ISET dollars, is because as soon as you have the Duke of Ed on your resume, on your applications going to post-secondary, it could be an employment and training initiative. But then you could get the land-based teachings, because what we do is the tribal journeys, because we're on the West Coast every summer. We got the tribal journeys going all along the coast, and we actually bought a canoe last year in partnership with the Friendship Center, and we are getting the local First Nations and skippers to help support, and then they have 1 year off, so we have a year of training to do, and then we'll have all the teachings from the traditional elders and being out on the land.
Any other questions? Yeah, you're free to jump. Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, I'm a career coach, and a lot of the job getting process, the process of getting a job, is mimicking communication styles that are very white, right? Like in how you present yourself. And so I'm wondering how I can support Indigenous students when they have to adapt how they present themselves in that job-getting style. And I'm not saying it's right, but this, when you need a job, you need to act the part to get there, right? And it requires verbal styles and visual styles and networking styles that are that require you to bend sometimes who you aren't. And I'm wondering how I can support Indigenous students in that.
I have one little tip. I think that it might be really, really important if you could find a mentor, an Indigenous mentor for your client, somebody who works in that field, who can talk to them about how they navigated that. And that might be really helpful.
I'm just going to turn that question around, because one of the things I think employers need to understand is how they need to be more inclusive. So as an example, if they don't have a smudging policy, like that's not inclusive. If their language isn't on the welcome door, that's not inclusive.
I know, I can't influence though that right now.
Well, yes, I think universities and colleges can, and I think we all can, and those are things that we do. Like on our welcome wall, we've got a 60-foot mural with the Indigenous languages and First Nation, Métis, Inuit to welcome people into the space. But also, we do what our sub-offices, the same thing, and we work with Indigenous Works. They have an Employer Choice Award that recognizes employers that are practicing inclusivity.
I was just going to add on that one, if that's okay. So within our Essential Skills Program, or IS4S, we do a lot of employer partners. I mean, we have our employment advisors working and coaching and mentoring and all that, but we've got to get to the root and, like you said, industry, right? So let's get those employment partners, work with them, and like I said, by Indigenous, for Indigenous. And like right now we have an ICBC, like a Crown Corporation, you know, a lot of people are like, okay, they pay well, but how do you get beyond those bureaucratic processes, right? And so it's like, no, come to the table, let's work together. And you know, this is our second time going through, we put like 12 people through, they're all hired. We're like, no, we're not going to accept, here's an interview, we're not going to be tokenized because of the diversity or cosmetic, you know, inclusivity. No, if you're going to do this and we're going to work with you, you better hire our people.
I just really like to thank Darian and Jelly Academy for putting this all together. It's really great. And hey, you know, this is the Indigenous room because we're the fun room and we're all laughing